I'm Fiona.
I'm Jordan.
We're on our way driving back from Yeppoon to Brisbane. We just finished our 2 weeks observership in Yeppoon. We thought we might just go through what happened there, and hopefully it can help you on your observership.
Cool.
So the first question is, what do you think were the highlights of this observership?
Okay, so, well, Yeppoon has a small hospital. It's got a ward with a bunch of beds and a decent emergency department, and has a lot of things that a big hospital would have, but just smaller. So that was pretty cool, and we got to see a lot of the hospital. Highlights were towards the second half of the observership, when I was handling my own patients, taking histories, and that was a big deal. So I felt like, oh, I'm doing doctoring things, which was amazing.
Yeah, I think definitely. Well, like one of the advantages of going under trees, which is like primarily rural-based small hospitals, is that you get to do a lot. We got to see our own patients, and a lot of the patients in small town are very nice as well.
Yeah, and
some
they're very
of them,
happy to have
yeah,
students.
they're very happy to have students practice on them. And I had a patient said to me, "Oh, just practice on me. Like, you have to start somewhere." And I just thought, most people are very kind.
I guess that's brings us to like procedural skills that we got to practice while we were at the hospital. So that was cannulas, blood draws, injections. Fiona did some suturing.
Yeah, luckily.
Indwelling catheter, wound management.
So yeah, we had a long list of things we get to do.
You know, picking up drips, administering medications. Yeah.
One of the helpful thing that we did in the beginning of observership is the medical director of the hospital encouraged us to write a wish list of everything that we want to do. When you have a list, and then you can know what to ask for. So I guess just be used to be used to introducing yourself, like, "Hi, I'm Fiona. I'm a first-year medical student here for observership for 2 weeks. I would love to do suturing. Is there an opportunity where you can supervise me to do this?" So be prepared for that.
Yeah.
That's useful.
Yeah, definitely ask people. You know, there's some people who take you under their wing and want to show you everything, and other people you may just need to let them know who you are and what you'd like to achieve. So definitely would recommend writing a list. You can hand that out to people, leave it on shift coordinator's desk.
Oh yeah, that was helpful.
Yeah, yeah, all around the hospital. Ours got photocopied and stuck up everywhere, but if someone doesn't do that for you, perhaps you could do that yourself. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Next question. What are some useful things to review from what we learned in first year before we head on the observership?
Yeah. So to prepare, I would say history taking and some of the physical examinations for me would have been. I feel like I would have benefited from practicing those a little more, only because I did a lot of that on this placement, so which was fine, learning on the job. But yeah, you'll hopefully get to do a lot of that yourself. So if you practice that'll set you up.
I definitely agree with that. We did a lot of history taking. I mean, maybe reviewing a whole year of material is too much, but if you can just focus on a few common presentations like chest pain, cold, fractures, I think just knowing those few common histories would be useful. And maybe ECG as well, because we see a lot of that in emergency departments.
Yeah, ECGs, basics of sort of reading a chest X-ray, that sort of thing. We had a great time though. You see, we have bikes in the back, so we tried to get around and see Yeppoon, which is a fantastic town, great beaches, nice places to go out. So I think that's a bit of a highlight too, is having a little holiday built in, so try to see whatever's around us, the locals. What do you do? What's some places I should, you know, take the opportunity to see while I'm here? Yeah. Have fun on your trees if you end up going.
Yeah, make most out of it.
I definitely recommend.
I'm David Rimmer. I just talk a lot. I'm the Director of Clinical Training for Central West. I've been on a bit of sick leave recently, but that's all good fun. Learning the other side of the ropes. I think the biggest issue is that for the majority of people, what you hear about rural in the cities is from people who have no idea. And so the idea of, so that's one thing. Second thing is that while there's a great emphasis on rural origin students, in fact, currently still the majority of doctors in rural Australia are city people who were converted. You know, who wants to spend an hour in traffic to, you know, both ways, getting to uni, going home again from uni, as opposed to, you know, a 5-minute walk, and for the other 55 minutes, you can just look at a beautiful sunrise and a sunset. And we have little community groups that do lots of things for students, and there's lots of opportunities. And it's the life that makes the difference.
Hi everyone, I'm Jess. I'm a third-year medical student at the University of Queensland, and I'm also the outgoing TROPIC president, which is one of the rural health clubs in Queensland. And I've done a few rural placements, or regional rural placements at this point through different programs through UQ and then through the past John Flynn program as well. I'm also currently at Hervey Bay at the moment for my 3rd year, and going to Toowoomba next year for 4th year. But that's pretty much me.
My turn. I guess I'm an example of what Dr. David Rimmer alluded to. I grew up in the city. I grew up in Sydney, and my reasons are I hated the traffic. I didn't want to pay for parking, and I wanted to see stars at night. Evelyn, are we going to throw the slide in now, or if you can?
Yes, I can. Hang on a moment.
Yeah, so maybe just got a slide just of some photos of some of the placements. And again, from everything that Marie mentioned in Mount Isa, because I went out to Mount Isa, that camel there right in the middle, that was a photo I taken in Mount Isa. And it really, some of these placements, when you come out from the city and you go to the bush, you really never want to go back into the city ever again. It's the community aspect, the experiences that you get, and the adventures that you get to have along the way really helps you kind of form a bond to these rural towns. Yes, it can be challenging. I'm not going to stay here, say that it's always been rainbows and unicorns. There are some challenges, but it's just all about giving it a go, being proactive about reaching out. So I'm not sure if you can see the first photo on the top left, that was in Broome. So I was part of that John Flynn placement program. So I met Evelyn and the whole team through there, and that was an incredible experience. So right under there, I can't remember where that is, but when you're on rural placements, you get to, deal with RFDS some of the time, almost every night, sometimes at some places. So getting to see that retrieval medicine, if that's an interest of yours, you get to kind of see that being on rural placements. Going further down to seeing all that fruits and vegetables, that was dropped in to us by patients, all the community members for the medical students who come to Collinsville. So Collinsville's a small rural town, I think 1,000 population west of Mackay region, and they love having students over. And the thing is that you got to be proactive, and this is a tip that to any of the students I give, here at JCU, but sometimes you can feel isolated. So what I do, which again, I encourage a lot of people to do, is find the community's Facebook group. Sorry, Evelyn. Oh, yeah. So find the community's Facebook group. There's always like a buy, swap and sell or a community board, and be like, hey guys, I'm a medical student, I'm coming to a community for 5 weeks, 10 weeks, whichever period, I'd love to get involved, let me know. And just by doing that, people would send you messages being like, they come to the hospital, let you know that, hey, there's an event happening. So the more you throw yourself into wanting to join and immerse within your community, the more opportunities you get. And talking about the stars, that was just in Barcaldine. I'm in Emerald at the moment, so I drove out to Barcaldine for a camp with my friend. And so the stars are incredible. Up top is time in Thursday Island at the start of this year, and including that sunset. Again, rural placements doesn't have to be about clinical stuff. You do see a lot of clinical stuff as well, but you can find a lot of opportunity. And down there is Dumaji, and I had met some incredible kids there, and then the Indigenous community there, really welcoming. The more as I said, and we discussed earlier, being open and wanting to learn, they're very much happy to help you. So so I probably didn't mention, so I'm a final year medical student from James Cook University. On my last placement in Emerald at the moment, and I will be joining Marie up in Mount Isa next year to commence my internship. So
That's exciting. Vid, can I ask, so with your very first placement, what were your expectations before you went on placement?
Yeah, I guess before I went on placement, I didn't know what to expect. I think my first rural placement was Collinsville, and a lot of people, everyone's like, "Oh gosh, I'm so sad that you got bumped. You got shafted to Collinsville. It wasn't your preference. There's nothing going on. You're gonna be bored." And I think it's just, I guess there's a personality aspect to it. Just listen to people who've been there before, identify, get a picture of what you're kind of getting yourself into, but then going with an open mind and being willing to diss the stereotypes. And then I asked them, when I was in Collinsville, had an amazing placement. There's a single doctor town, and you kind of see the amazing community aspect and the amazing medicine that you get to see, but then also you see some of the challenges. So some of the challenges being a rural doctor is you see that, they sometimes are the only doctor on call 24/7, to the point that some don't even have time to eat lunch. And, when I was in Collinsville, seeing the doctor who, as a poor uni student, it probably makes sense, but as a doctor who makes a bit of decent salary, he was eating 2-minute cup noodles for lunch because that's all he had time for. And kind of seeing that, and then seeing that, how the nurses support him being there because they want the doctor to be there. So I guess before going in, I was, I think I had hesitations, being like, oh, I'm going to be super isolated. I'm going to be bored, have nothing to do. And that was completely debunked when you go there and you make the effort. And there is a bit of ownership. If you go to a community, I have some friends and mates from uni who go to placement, to rural placements, because JC it's compulsory. You go there, but then they're not open-minded to it, and they'd be like, oh God, I'm here, I'm stuck here. And once you have that attitude, it really impacts on how you get involved with the community and how the patients or the community see you. And sometimes when you go to a rural community where there's these students come and go, which happened to me at a different community I won't mention the name of, where you're treated like a revolving door. And that's because of an example set by the previous students. And it is unfortunate, but it's, I guess, up to us to make them think that that's not true. You give me a good experience, and I'd think of coming back.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. I'm in Emerald right now, and I'm loving it, and I could see myself coming back here.
That's amazing. What about you, Jess? Did you experience the same, or did you have, was your experience a bit different with your first placement?
I think my experience has been pretty similar to Vid's, really. I agree with Vid in terms of, having a really open mind and it being a big personality thing. I think that's a huge aspect about medical placements. And I really, I agree that some people, they get these placements and it's like the world has ended. And, if you have that sort of outlook, you're never going to enjoy it ever. But, I've just had a ball. Similar to what David Rimmer was saying, I also city girl, grew up in Brisbane, went to UQ for undergrad and med, and I'd always really enjoyed being out in the, rural areas in the countryside, but I never really had the opportunity to, work out there or anything like that. And then each, opportunity that I've had to do, I haven't really done much any of my placement in Brisbane other than in phase 1. And I've just loved it. Each placement, each, region, each town that you're going to is so unique. And I think one of the real beauties about doing a regional, rural or remote placement is that you get to appreciate and learn about the things that really set towns apart. And that's something that, in metropolitan, you just don't really get to appreciate. You can't really appreciate what sets the Royal apart from the PA, in my opinion. And I think that's just the beauty of these areas. And it is so correct in saying that if you embrace the placement and if you embrace the town, they will embrace you. I have experienced this in all of my placements, but I think the one that really stands out would certainly be in Theodore. I was there for 12 weeks and we were so a part of the community. We were in the local tennis competition. The locals would take us up the creek or the river in their boat, just for the day. I'd walk along the street to, the main street to get some lunch, and the kids at the school would wave to me because they see me at tennis, and at the GP. So I think if you're willing to embrace a placement, it's just amazing how the community will take you on and, treat you as really that you've always been there. And I think Vid's also really hit the mark in saying that some communities, I think, do have a bit of a bad experience with medical students in that, the med student stays in their room, all day other than when they're at placement. They don't really get involved at all. They might see them at the IGA. And then, they've got one doctor who's overworked, and I can understand how that would be really hard to then embrace, students who are just coming for a short time and then leaving, never to be seen again. But I think it's our responsibility to change the way that those placements are experienced for a community. It's so important for us to do. So yeah, I'm hooked, I think. And it's been really interesting in my role with Tropic, because obviously a lot of the emphasis at the moment is on, with the new regional medical pathway, in keeping students who are, from the regions, keeping them there and hoping that they choose to work there. But I really think that there's such importance in, getting students out who've never had the opportunity. And a lot of them really fall in love with it. I think it's new, it's different, and I don't think we can underestimate the importance of, city folk getting out into the regions and rural communities and just absolutely loving it, like me and like Vid.
So when do you think you actually had made the decision, I'm going to go out rural? Was it before? Did you have those thoughts before you went on placement, or was it during your placement that you thought, I love this, I'm going back out here? Or,
I think probably a bit of both. I've always really enjoyed being in probably regional, rural areas in terms of, just spending my time out there. I like the open air, but I think each placement really kind of just started to, water the seed that was already, planted, I guess. And each experience has just been better and better. Well, the first one was great, and it's just, gotten even better from there. So I can't even imagine really working in a metropolitan setting anymore. But I don't really think there was like a super, inciting moment where I, was just decided, but it's just throughout, the last 4 or 5 years, it's just been a process of, realizing really that there's nowhere else I want to work than, out here.
When you do come out, I guess I encourage a lot of any medical student or allied health students, take that step and do a rural placement, because once you do and you see these rural doctors who are amazing, they're such amazing mentors, and they have the time to on the afternoons to immerse yourself within the clinical environment as well and teach you on a one-to-one basis, as opposed to if I were to stay even in Townsville, where you're one of so many other students, just being in a smaller learning environment, you see a breadth of different conditions from, you know, in the morning you'll have a fractured toe because a cow kicked my feet, like, you know, the thing, to like, you know, and then maybe if your child's a birthing facility, then you can, you know, be assisting with birds as well, which and then you'll suture people up and get like hands-on practical skills. And then like when you do those kind of placements, you go back to, even for me, Townsville, my hometown, which is still regional, and I'm like, oh, like I wanna, like I'm not learning anything here. Like I'm actually learning so much more being in a smaller town.
I might throw to our supervisors, and I'm going to include you, David, as well, because I know you've had lots of students on placements, but what are your expectations, you know, of the students during placements?
Can I say something?
Mm-hmm.
Justin? Yep.
Yes.
So from my perspective, the best thing for a student to do would be to come have a few days, see what the place is like, but then plan your own learning. And as things come up along the way, you might get invited to the sheep sheds. And I know David Rimmer there, he's been organising students to go out to experience life on properties and things along the way. You know, if you come to me and say, such and such has invited me to go and look at the shearing sheds, I'm going to say, knock yourself out, go and have a look, because it's not just about experiencing the shearing sheds, but seeing the conditions that people might work in, why they get the injuries they get, experiencing the heat that they have to work in every day, and then realising when they come in and they're incredibly dehydrated and they're, you know, completely done, then you know why, or you get that, you know, that the idea of how hard some people actually do work out here in the country. And so I'm very much for you to plan your own learning and plan your own cultural experiences, depending on who you come across, and you will get invited to any number of places, and I still do today. You know, just last week, someone invited me out to their property, actually twice last week. I declined because I've been to many properties, but you know, for yourselves, it would be a good experience, and I won't stand in the way of that if that's something that you approach me with, for example, as a supervisor. And I would probably predict 80% of supervisors would do about the same. So plan your own learning or experiences, and seek our support or you know, supervision for whatever you plan. You'll get more out of planning something for yourself than if I do something for you, if that makes any sense. David, you could probably back that up.
Absolutely. I think the thing that people need to bring out is curiosity. I mean, genuine, open curiosity.
Exactly.
And a sense that they can actually play with parts of their personality that they haven't used before. So, you know, if you're naturally a bit shy, you can be a bit more open, a bit more gregarious, you know, sort of join a few more things, because, you know, you might only be there for a short time, but you might learn so much about yourself in terms of what you do and how you do it. I just think the taking hold of the opportunity is really important. But the second thing is talk. So, you know, if you talk to people, you know, even it's one of the reasons why, one of the things we're trying to work with, and it's a real problem in a lot of our facilities, is parallel consulting, where the student consults and then, you know, does a student type history, and then, you know, the doctor comes in and sits beside and actually does a consult. And a lot of our places don't have enough rooms to do that. But what that does is it gives you an opportunity to practice talking to people. And so I think curiosity, a willingness to have conversations, and a willingness to put yourself out there, because, you know, even if you do, there was a famous example video I was thinking about in terms of people from Sydney, a guy who came out from the University of Western Sydney, who said, how do you guys, we were doing a bike ride, and I was saying, we had to check which way the wind blows, because you go out into the wind and come back with the wind, so you don't get exhausted. And he said, how do you tell which way? So we said, how do you tell which way is the wind blowing? And he pulled out his iPhone and he started sort of checking things. And so I just went, anyway, that became something that he took in good grace, and it actually got him a whole range of conversations and interactions and stuff. And I think he ended up in rural New South Wales, but somebody's got to go to New South Wales. They can't all come to the best places.
Tiffany, would you like to add?
It's very hard. I think David and Justin have already said a lot of it, but
yes.
One of the things that I sort of try and sit down and talk to the students when they come is be enthusiastic learners, because I'm not going to lie, we as rural doctors are busy. All doctors are busy. I personally think we as rural doctors are more busy because, I'm a rural doctor. But if people are enthusiastic, asking questions and openly engaging, we're actually more willing to give up our time to stop and teach you. And, you're the students that will then hand the suture material to and help get to suture with us, or the students who we will, when something cool comes into ED, will ring because we know that you're interested and that you want to see that stuff. And so you can come to a rural placement and you can come for the day and you can sit in the room and you can go home and you can study all night or watch Netflix and chill, whatever it is that floats your boat. But the students who come out who really get engaged in what's happening and really ask questions and probe us, we're going to give you so much more back. And it's one of the things that motivates us to teach, is when a student comes out who's really eager to be rural and then is really eager to learn. And they're often the students then who give us better feedback at the end and say that they got a lot out of it. Similar to David and Justin as well, I think one of the big things, I am a rural person, so coming back rural for me was a natural progression. But this is a great opportunity for you to actually experience life in a rural area. So it's not just about experiencing medicine. Doing medicine is actually probably only about 40% of what I do. The rest of it is the fact that I live in Longreach and that I live and breathe being here now, raising my family here. And so being involved in the community and finding out about things that are going on and taking those opportunities to go out and do stuff is really important, because it really helps you to establish what the benefits are of living and working in a rural area beyond just the clinical side of things. I'd like it to be fair, we're all saying the same thing because we all practice the same way. And we as doctors try and get you involved too. So David already hinted at the bike ride. So in Longreach, very few medical students get through Longreach without going on a bike ride with David. And when we know what interests certain people, we make sure that we line up opportunities. So for example, I'm in the town band. So anyone who plays a musical instrument, even if they've blown a trumpet once, they get a spot in the town band while they're here. And we find ways like that to sort of tweak everybody's interests and show them what the town has.
Can we hear from the students? Some questions. The quiet ones.
Well, quiet's never how I'm usually described, but I'll jump in here. So I'm a third year Griffith student doing placement at Gympie, and I made a special request to actually do fourth year at Gympie as well. So I do have to go to Sunshine Coast Uni Hospital just to do ortho ICU. I haven't chosen my elective placement for fourth year yet, and I'd like to go somewhere that has got something to do with the Royal Flying Doctor Service, because if I'm lucky enough to get onto the Rural Generalist pathway, which is what I want to do, I want to be able to do emergency and maybe remote medicine as ASTs. My plan is to go back to my little country town eventually, or stay in somewhere like Emerald, or I like Central Queensland, so that's where I intend to go. But my hometown down in Victoria hasn't had a doctor since 2018, which was the catalyst for me sitting the GAMSAT and having a total career change. So how do I go about getting to somewhere like Emerald, or finding out who's got a Royal Flying Doctor Service potential for experience as part of a year 4 placement would be my question.
Do you want me?
Marie, yes, please, Marie. Yes.
All right. Okay. So my advice. So there, you can ask a university to assist you. I don't know how much, whether they actually organise that or not. There are a number of places where there are RFDS sites. Usually the RFDS placements are very hard to get, so they're yeah, kind of, yeah, a bit like hen's teeth, really. You got to be really lucky to get one, and they're organised through Brisbane. However, if you go to somewhere, there is always the option of asking if you can get involved. I know in Mount Isa, for example, sometimes that we can get you in with the, you know, for a week with the Royal Flying Doctors. I have had I've had a couple of Griffith students come up to do 2 weeks of RFDS placement this year. One of whom unfortunately got COVID the day after he got here, and so he didn't get to do anything, but yeah, so that's an option. The other thing too is that with your remote placements, like I'm not quite sure about down south further, but say in Burketown or Normanton, places like that, they often have retrievals. So you get to learn, you might not necessarily be in the plane doing the medicine, you know, with the retrieval medicine with those guys, but you get to learn what to do if you've got to get a patient ready to go and the paperwork that needs to be filled out. And it is quite a huge process to actually get all of that done, and so you can get that experience.
I've been lucky enough to do 2 retrievals in my pediatrics rotation at Gympie. So
excellent.
It was an awesome experience. And I mean, I'm born and bred rural, MMM 5 for most of my life. Moved to Melbourne for 7 years whilst my daughter was going through secondary school, and then moved back rural again to, I think we're still MMM 5. So we've got a population of about 800 people, 40 minutes to the next largest regional centre. So, yeah, being able to do the remote and rural medicine is important to me. But if I can't get in with RFDS, that's fine. And growing up on a farm and everything, I actually want to see some of the other like Queensland farming, because Victorian farming just doesn't the property next door to ours was 3,500 hectares, and that was big for Victorian standards, but that's like a hobby farm for Queensland. So I'm looking forward to going west and going central west if I can. Maybe not too far west, because I do like the water and the beach, but yeah, well, I heard someone say before that they're at Emerald, so
yeah, I'm in Emerald, and I applied for an RFDS placement and didn't get it, and then that was the end of the there, because regardless of where you are on a rural placement, like the retrieval stuff happened, and it could be simply writing your name with the nurse's desk, being like, call at any time, you know, and then they'll call you at 2 o'clock, be like, hey, you know, the doctor's not here yet, if you want to come take a history, that transfer when the RFDS comes, and then seeing them stabilize the patient is pretty much, I haven't done an RFDS, like Jess probably can tell you, but they stabilize the patient in front of you, and then they load them up on a plane. You don't want to just go and come back. You've kind of seen all that medicine that's involved there.
Yeah, I was lucky enough because the student accommodation at Gympie is literally across the paddock from the hospital, both women's health and pediatrics. For 3rd year, I put my number on the whiteboard, and so there was a Cat 1 emergency Caesar at like 11 o'clock at night that I got to scrub in for, because, well, we don't have interns at Gympie, and we're lucky if we've got registers most of the time over the last 12 months. So yeah, so that was good. And also got to do like IPAP and CPAP on a couple of newborns, being called in at like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, so to go assist in pediatrics. So rural's awesome. Like, yeah.
I guess I'm because the other students haven't asked a question, I might like to ask a question to the supervisors if we've got time. Again,
Wait,
talking about
just to let everybody know, we're actually due back, but you ask your question.
It's just about, we're talking about being, how amazing rural is, but we also have experienced challenges. So how do you guys experience, what are some challenges you guys experience as rural doctors, and what are ways to cope with that?
I'll go first. Oh gosh, okay. So probably the biggest things in terms of challenges is, as a rural doctor, sometimes you're it. I'm very fortunate. I work in a town where we have often about 10 doctors floating around at a time, but often at 2 o'clock in the morning, you may have worked all day and it ends up being you when the sick person comes in. And so that can sometimes obviously be exhausting. And I will admit, sometimes it does feel like you do some of these things at a little bit of expense to your family. So for example, you've intermittently seen my 12-month-old pop up and down into the picture because Daddy's very bad when it's Daddy's turn to watch her. But there's been nights where I saw her at 8 o'clock in the morning when I dropped her at daycare, and I didn't actually see her until 8 o'clock the next morning because I was working so much that I actually didn't get home during any awake times with her. But the flip side is that then you get to come home and talk about the patient that you saved, or the palliative care patient that you admitted and made comfortable, or the patient who I managed in the GP practice who presented to hospital, who I got to have that continuation of care. So it's always that sort of double-edged sword where there's definitely some expenses emotionally in terms of doing what we do, but then there's such great reward. And I think that's what makes people stay, is if the expense is too much and the reward's not there, then people are going to leave. And so it's about getting that balance. And, to be fair, I only work 2 days a week for the health service at the moment so that I can have that balance and know that I might have a really busy day, but know I've got the next day where I can be a mum.
I think the challenges is, from my perspective, is about knowing where your limits are. When you get to the point of being too tired or too old, or when it's but the reality is that you have to accept that no matter what's in front of you, there's always going to be somebody who can do it better. There's always going to be, like, if you have a motor vehicle accident, 100k out of Longreach at 2 o'clock on a Sunday morning, you're not going to do as well as if you have a motor vehicle accident at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning at the corner of Bowen Bridge Road and Hurston Road, which is where Royal Brisbane Emergency Department is. So the reality is that you're there and you have to do the best with what you've got. That's actually your lot in life, which you've chosen, but it's also the patient's lot in life, which they've chosen by living out in a remote and rural area. And what you can do is work on developing your skills to the best that you can, comparing your practice with as many people as possible, and continuing to learn all the time. And so I have a sort of a saying that, when the big light comes to shine and says, did you do well enough? You need to actually stand up and be accountable. Not hide under a rock and say, well, somebody else could have done it better. And I think intellectual honesty is probably the best antidote to rural burnout. So I think one of the things that I say to students when they first come out is you need to work on yourself as a person your entire life. There's the good people have something to give. People who are, rested, refreshed, have a family that they see and look after, have something to give. So working on your strengths and building something that you feel is worthwhile giving, I think would be my advice.
Thanks, everybody. If everybody can just, I think it's leave room at the bottom, and then we'll go back to the main room. Thank you.